This is Meet the Author, and I'm your host, Tigner Rand. Meet the Author is part of Rolling Out's book club series where I talk with authors about their new books, projects, and of course, what inspires them to write. Joining me today is Shelley Williams. Shelley Williams is a sister who has superpowers. She's a mother, she's a Broadway director, and now an acclaimed author. Shelley has written a new children's book, Your Legacy, a bold reclaiming of your enslaved history. This beautiful and colorful book is designed for young readers between the ages of 4 and 8 years old. Along with the historical factoids, Your Legacy is accompanied by some phenomenal and colorful artwork by the artist Tanya Engel. This book starts from the beginning, 1619, and takes you, the reader, on a historical journey to the present. I would like to welcome today Ms. Shelley Williams, the author of Your Legacy. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Tigner. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Before we get started, this is the book. This is the colorful book. On both front and back and all through and through. There's a lot of detailed artwork and a great book. It's also available on blackbookstore.com. So for those who have not had an opportunity to check it out, find it, a good place to start is at blackbookstore.com, where we recognize all Black authors such as Shelley Williams. So tell me, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, Tigner, I was attempting to have a conversation with my daughters about their enslaved ancestors. And actually, I was trying to have a conversation with them about slavery, to be perfectly honest. And I didn't know how to begin the conversation. And I kept thinking, well, maybe they're not old enough. You know, maybe I'll wait until they're 6 and 7. Maybe I'll wait until they're 7 and 8. And the one thing I did know for sure is that I wanted them to hear about their enslaved history from me. Because when I learned about it in school, I was traumatized.
True, that is very true. What little
and
bit
I
you
had
did
a lot
learn.
of questions. Yeah, what we did learn was traumatizing. And those are images that you can't unsee. And I was in a space with teachers that were ill-equipped to give me what I needed. And not just me, but every child, what they needed to hear, both Black and white. So I knew I wanted to have this conversation with my girls. And so I started looking for materials and I started doing some research. And I very quickly realized that I did not want to have a conversation with them about slavery. I wanted to have a conversation about their enslaved ancestors. And understanding that distinction created an opportunity for me to begin the conversation with them.
I like that. Because yeah, you're right, it could be very traumatizing if you really get into the crux of what slavery was, the injustice of our people, our ancestors. But it's a different conversation when you talk about the legacy, the history of from whence you came. So how did that conversation go when you started? I mean, so now that took you down a whole nother rabbit hole, because then you had to start looking for some history of family. So were you successful in that journey?
Well, I can only go so far in my family, which is also the part that felt incomplete. And then I kind of deal with that in the book in my own way. But what I did realize is, the beginning of the book, the first 5 words of the book are "Your story begins in Africa." And that to me was like, that's it. Because whenever you think about our ancestors, we think about them on the shores of America getting sold, right? We think about the first trauma. We don't think about them in Africa, in their freedom, building kingdoms, really growing nations, thriving. So when I began the story there, I thought the most important thing was to understand who our people were before they were traumatized by slavery in America. And that as we look at, I think of this book as a conversation starter, because there are many more conversations that I need to have with my children about slavery, about the oppressive act of slavery and the impact it had on our ancestors. But first, I wanted them to know who our ancestors were.
Yes.
because who they were is still inside of us. That is why we are here, because they survived, because they were brilliant, because of their intellect, because of their grace and their dignity. We are here. We are their success story. So we need to know who they were before we find out what happened to them and what they endured.
I like that. Amen. Based upon the research you were able to find, what little nuggets of history were you able to give to your daughters?
Well, something that I never realized when I saw images of our people in the history books and when I saw movies that depicted slavery, when I heard our people speaking broken English, I never once considered that they were fluent in another language. I thought, well, they're ignorant, right? That they're uneducated. I never imagined their brilliance in their native tongue. When I learned about Pidgin, which is a way that they not only showed their love for each other when they were all separated, they all, there's so many countries in Africa, that they all spoke different languages. And they literally created a language so they could communicate with each other. That's brilliant.
It really is. It is.
And that's something that you don't see when you see an image of someone hunched over with lashes on their backs. So what I wanted to do, what I learned were all of these moments in which they use their intellect to love each other, to take on each other as family, to create bonds, the ways that they, all the ways that they escaped, not just the ones that escaped to freedom, but the ways that they snuck books and spices, the ways that they sang. All of those acts of defiance were bold and brave. And so, really kind of highlighting all the things that we, all the ways that they were courageous, and not just the ones that made it to freedom, but the ones that helped each other, the ones that created opportunities for each other. So that was something that was, surprising to, for me, reading about this as a grown woman, learning about this.
Yeah, you're right. It's so much little things in our history and from our ancestors that we don't know. They definitely did not teach it if you were going to traditional public school. But a lot of people may not know the part with the cornrows, what that really meant. Growing up, I know my parents and grandparents, that was quote unquote almost being militant to have your hair braided, but it has a historical, meaning to it. It was really almost a map for people based upon the intricate patterns that they put in their heads. It was really a map on how to go from north, south, east to west to run away from the plantation.
Yes, I'm working with Jacqueline Wilson, and she has a book called Awake, which is all about her family's legacy. And they made quilts.
Yes,
and those quilts had maps.
That's right. They sure did. The quilts, there was so many different things that, it just gives you chills when you stop and think about it, that here are these people, as you stated, that their owners, the master looked at them as just being illiterate, dumb Black people. Yet right up under your nose, they were creating maps in their own languages, using the drums as a way to communicate, hair, so many different things we just don't even know about. But these are just some of the few that we do know.
Yeah, Black excellence cannot be stopped.
It really can't.
It cannot. There is no way to suppress what is inside us, the gifts that are inside us. We will find a way to thrive. We always have, and we always will. And what I want more than anything is for children to read this book, for Black children to look around and know that we built this.
Yes.
We made this. I went to Washington, D.C. A little while ago with my kids, and we were in the African American Museum. And there's a plaque there that shows the Lincoln Monument, that shows the White House, and shows, we built all of that.
All of those things, yes.
And to walk around with my Black girls and say, we built that, and we built that, and we built that, is a very different way of seeing DC than when I was a child. Because when I saw it, I only saw the whiteness. I saw the Lincoln Memorial. I saw the White House with, at that time, only white presidents and families. I did not see our excellence all up and through that the way that I did this time.
Exactly. All those hidden figures that are there, messages that's there that we just don't know. And it's just such amazing how that now we're dealing in our society where there's this critical race theory that they want to try to erase all of this because it doesn't meet the message that they want. But here it is history is history. And we were part of that, be it in a negative connotation or a positive. This is a positive side because, yes, we built the White House. We built the monuments. We built America.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because, all of the conversations about critical race theory are just, smoke and mirrors, because it's just a label, that people are using to hide behind. But
Correct.
The truth is, we have to tell more complete versions of our history.
Exactly. And we need more people like you who are in a position at the table to either be able to write the books or to find the right plays to even tell the story. It's because you have control of that. A lot of times we can say 15, 20, 30 years ago, how many Shelleys were there to be able to be in a position to tell a story, whatever that story was. Now, and over the last 30 years, we have seen more people come out in different forms of art and mediums of art to be able to tell these stories. But we have to now support our people also so that people know that it's our message, our story. That's
right. And Tigner, I do believe, my gift in the world is telling stories on stage and now in books. And that is, what I do for a living.
Right.
But I do believe that the storytellers are in every home.
They are.
We have to tell our stories, and we have to embolden our children with our history. And we have to, make it a point when we sit down to dinner on Sunday that we say, today I'm going to tell you a story about Uncle such and such or Aunt such and such, that we create opportunities to say, this is an opportunity for me to grow you, to grow your understanding of your Blackness, to grow your understanding of your excellence, to grow your understanding of your legacy, because we are going to change the world.
Yes.
We are going to change the world.
You're absolutely correct. And we got to get out of the problem, which I can understand why some of our big mamas did not want to tell the story to their children because of the horror that may have happened to them. So they suppressed it. But we have to try to find a way to overcome that, to be able to tell that the rest of the story, like you said, to our children and our children's children so that it will live on. Otherwise, it will die in the grave.
That's right. That's right. They did it. They did everything they could to get us here. And we have to be strong enough to honor them by acknowledging their sacrifice.
Yes. What legacy are you wanting to leave for your children and for the community?
I want to leave a legacy. I want people, when they think about me, to think about someone who is brave and who is authentic and who is always on a journey to be better. I pray that as long as I am alive, I am seeking. I never want to be done. I never want to be at that place where I feel like I've learned it all and now I'm going to sit back. And no, I hope that I am still discovering until my very last breath.
That's great. That's great. It's almost obvious what the backstory is of the title, but I have to ask you, what was the backstory for selecting the title of the book?
Well, it was interesting. I was writing the story and I kept thinking, am I writing this just for Black kids? Or am I writing it for all kids?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, and I read a lot of stories to my children, a lot of books to my kids when they were younger. And there were very few stories that were truly for them. You know, there were
Right.
stories where there was like a Black illustration, but a real story for them. Not a lot of them existed. So when I thought about it, I was like, I'm writing this for us. And when you see your legacy, I'm talking to Black kids. And it doesn't mean that in the same way that I have read and, white books my whole life and had that windows and mirrors where I can look at someone else's experience and see it, that it doesn't mean that white families cannot enjoy this book. And I hope that they do. And I hope that they get it and learn it and read with their kids. But I really wanted it to be, when you read it to your family, the children in your life, you say your story begins in Africa. You will do great things. Walk tall. You will change the world. I'm talking to those kids, and I'm hoping that the reader, the adult who's reading that out loud, is, the boldness of hearing an adult say that to a child,
Yes.
an uncle, aunt, and grandfather, a grandmother. These are all affirmations that I wanted the adults in their life to say to these Black children when the entire world is telling them something else. I wanted them to hear from someone that they love, you will do great things. You will change the world. So that's how I came up with your legacy.
Okay. And great point, because I did pick up on little nuggets of affirmations, and it was almost like when you say it, I'm saying it in first person, or I'm telling it to someone in first and second person that you, like you said, your story begins in Africa. So it pinpoints it right to the person I'm reading it to. If you don't mind, could you read a page or two from the books, from the book?
I'm happy to.
And one thing I noticed, and I like your sight words. Your sight words, you made them very pronounced, so people could see them. This is a sight word. Was that intentional?
It was. It was. You're talking about love, intellect, the big words.
Yes.
So
yes.
I will tell you how I came to that. When I was in junior high school, I had to make a family tree. Okay. And I made my family tree, and I could go back 4 generations. And I was so proud of it. And then I went into school, and the teacher hung all the ones up in the hallway. And my little tree looked like nothing compared to my white peers who could go back 9 and 10 and 12 generations.
Right.
And I was mortified, because you just go back so far and then there's nothing. The names were changed, people were separated, people were born at home, there just were no more records.
Correct.
And I wanted to acknowledge our ancestors, and I wanted to create a family tree that everyone could feel a part of, because I never wanted another child to feel that again. And so I the whole time I was writing the book, I was like, and it's going to end with a tree. And I was like, how am I going to do this tree? And I thought about doing branches that kids could fill it. I had all these different ideas. And then I realized, if I'm going to name our ancestors, I can't just pick out names. I could have used my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather and put them in the book, but that would have alienated other kids, right?
Right.
And I also thought about, even with my own great-grandparents, were those the names that their parents would have given them? And because I took so much pride in naming my own child. I know what a name means.
Exactly.
So I was like, well, if I can't name them, I can define them by the qualities that they have passed down to us. I know who they were because I know what they've been through. And so that's how I came up with love, intellect, determination, courage, brilliance, ingenuity, grace, strength, and dignity.
Wow.
And they became, instead of, the branches on the tree, that those are our roots.
Yes. Wow. I love it. If you don't mind, if you just pick up a page for me to read, just so that people could just hear the rhythmic poetry of the words that you've written down.
Absolutely. I'll read the first couple pages. How about that?
Okay, that's cool.
Your story begins in Africa. Did you know Africans were the first people on Earth? Africa is a continent that is home to many countries and many thriving nations. For thousands of years, Africans cultivated their land and grew many kingdoms that were passed down from generation to generation. They dreamt of the day their land would be passed down to you. African people had great pride in their heritage and culture. Each nation spoke its own language and had its own identities and talents. They believed their skin was kissed by the sun and made many colors of brown to reflect all the beauty of the earth.
That page, that was the page that really touched me the most, that I really liked. They believed their skin was kissed by the sun and made many colors of brown to reflect all the beauty of the earth. And that pretty much depicts our race.
It does.
We have our own spectrum of brown.
We do.
It could be from the lightest of light to almost white to midnight black.
Yeah. You know, I've got family in Huntsville, Alabama, and they've got that red clay dirt.
Yes, yes.
And, you know, it just made me think about, you know, how our color has been demonized.
Yes.
Always. And I thought about, you know, how I talk about it with my children. And I was like, brown is like, it's like the earth. And I started thinking about, you know, all the different colors of brown. And I was like,
yes,
that's extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
It really is. And the more we can teach our children, our friends, our family, how important being Black is, they will stop with the negative connotation that so often is spewed out of mouths, sometimes even out of our own families due to ignorance. We say negative things toward each other without even realizing what we're saying. And though that we heard the saying growing up, sticks and stones don't break your bones and words can never hurt me. That's not true. Words can cut as sharp as a knife. If right. You know, but you know, it really can do that. And unfortunately, we've had generations of young people, Black and brown, who have been stigmatized off of just words.
Yeah, words are powerful. Words are powerful. We can change our destiny by speaking it into existence.
Yes.
And just saying, you know, saying to a child every day, I love you. You are brilliant. You have a purpose, will change their life. Just that will change the trajectory of their life, because when they walk out that door and the world tells them something else, in their tape, in their mind, they know they have a purpose and they are brilliant.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. It is. What do you want the readers to take? What do you want? Well, you have really two readers. You have the moms and the dads who's reading the book. And then you have the little ones who have been able to start reading. What do you want them to take away from your legacy?
I think of the book, I call it a 2-generation book at a time.
I like that. 2-generation book. Yeah.
Because I needed this book. You know, I thought I was writing it for my children, but I needed it. There are a lot of things that I learned writing the book that I would have never known until I was seeking this information.
What did you learn?
You know, when I started looking up all the inventors in the book.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. You listed quite a few, and there were quite a few I did not recognize.
Yes. And that was incredible. You know, when I wrote down in the book, what I want is like a city landscape. And I just want to see that Black excellence is everywhere. Everywhere. And this was just an opportunity to kind of just show some of the few. There were so many more, but just some of the few that we could just, say, if you were looking around any city block, you see Black genius, ingenuity everywhere, long-standing. That is an indelible part of who we are around the world. You cannot stand on a corner and not see a mailbox, or, a light that has a filament in it, or, you cannot go to a fair and not have ice cream. There is just everywhere. Sarah Boone with the ironing board, just like there's so much everywhere. And we think about Black excellence in the world of entertainment and culture and fashion, and not always connected to steamboat engines, to power wars.
Brilliant minds who were engineers, who created things that helped, the cotton gin. Which it helped revolutionize cotton picking for that time. But who did it? But none other than a person who probably was in a field and he figured out it has to be a better way.
It is, it was also important to me in the book to acknowledge that genius was not rewarded. That patents could not be given to, were forbidden to be given to Black people, and other families have benefited from our wealth. To just say, let's just say this out loud, that the genius, if we had been acknowledged,
it could change. It would have been a whole different. That is the part of history that they want to suppress. You want to keep showing Black people with their backs bent, hanging from a tree, strange fruit, but you're not talking about the brilliance of the mind of those who created things. What we're talking about now. One of the, as great as Hidden Figures the movie was, and that everyone loved, it also saddens me to think that you figure that here these women were working at Nassau at this time in the 60s. Fast forward 50 years, how many Black folk work for Nassau now? These were brilliant math minds. And the average Black child is going to tell you what? I don't like math.
They're not being pushed in those directions.
Exactly. There's so many brilliant minds that we had the Tuskegee Airmen. How many airmen were flying airplanes, and they were segregated because they did not want them to, quote, fight for America. Yet they were forced into it to help save some other white pilots, thus thrusted them into the forefront of fighting. But now if we look today, we probably can count, it's not nowhere near as many that we should have had who were pilots for commercial airlines.
Tell the stories, when we begin to retell those stories, we begin to change the trajectory of children who don't realize we've already been there.
Exactly.
We need to reclaim our space.
You're right. I like that. We have to reclaim the space because our forefathers, they fought to get there, and they went in numbers, large numbers. It was not just 1 and 2. Large numbers of men and women who did things and sacrificed their lives for us to be at the forefront of where we are now.
That's right.
Just stop and think about the Mr. Roberson. He was a singer, but he also did plays as well. There should have been more of Robersons in America.
He got blackballed.
And the film director, 1920s, is it Michoud? One of the first Black film producers. But the only thing that hurt him was because he was writing silent movies. But he was at the forefront of the craft of filming, and they tried to blackball him, but they couldn't. But until motion pictures and sound came, that was his demise. And we're not talking sports, ladies and gentlemen. We're not talking singing. We're not talking entertainment. These were people who were behind, who actually were taking a seat at the table and were making moves in America.
Yeah, it's our time.
Yeah.
And it begins by us telling our stories and seeking our stories and questioning every story we're told.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, is there another side to that story? You know, when I talk to my kids about George Washington and the teachers say, you know, he's the first president of the United States, they also say, my kids will say, he also signed the Fugitive Slave Act.
Amen. Yes, he did.
Let's make sure we're telling all of that story. And my girls will be quick to tell any teacher who stops at, he was the first president of the United States. Let's now talk about the totality of what he did.
The holistic picture of what was behind it, because he was a slave owner.
Yes.
And before the White House, before Washington became the capital, he was going back and forth to Philadelphia. He had slaves in Philadelphia and he had slaves in DC. And there's a book about one who never got caught, who was able to get away, because at that time Philadelphia was free and everything from DC below was still enslaved. They don't tell those stories.
No, but we must.
We must.
Those days of they are, we must tell those stories. We have to tell those stories. And that's the difference, is that it doesn't matter, you know, public education is always going to have restrictions and there's always going to be a gatekeeper.
Yes.
But in my house, I'm the gatekeeper.
Yes. Say, I teach. I am the one.
Yes.
And more families, more mothers and fathers need to do that, you know, and it could be something just as simple as you stated, talking about your legacy, your family. Grandma was this. They owned businesses. They didn't finish the 5th grade, but they had stores. They had property. They had whatever it is. Tell the story.
Yes. And don't be ashamed that they didn't finish school.
Exactly. So
you know,
most
because
of them
oftentimes our people didn't finish school because they were working.
They were working
exactly. And there's great pride in working to help your family and
That's
making
correct.
sacrifices so that we can have an education. Look
That's
at what
right.
they did for us. They saw in the future what we could not. I can't imagine my children not going to school.
Right.
But those children turned around and said, I will do whatever needs to be done to help this family, because it's more than just us.
Yes. What surprised you most about writing this book?
That I wrote the book. I'll tell you what surprised me most is that I never imagined that I would write a book. You know, that isn't my career. So I was, I did have a feeling. I remember saying once, I was sitting down with an agent and they said, is there anything else you want to do? And I was like, I want to write this children's book. And I started talking about it and the agent was like, you should just focus on directing. And then I actually switched. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, well, they know, right? They're professionals.
And you received it.
Yeah. And then I went to another agency and they said, is there anything else you've ever wanted to do? And I hesitated because someone had already told me this is a bad idea. Mm-hmm. But it was really kind of, you know, it was really getting to my heart. Like I really wanted to tell this story, not because I felt like I knew how to write a book, but I thought if I'm struggling with this and how to talk to my kids about their enslaved, and other people must be too. I can't be the only person traumatized in the 4th grade by, you know, the slavery chapter. No, but we never talked about it. You know, I never looked around at other kids and was like, isn't this crazy? Like you just kind of took it in and suppressed it. And, so I just thought, I feel like other people would use this and would want it, you know? And when I said to this other agent that I want to tell this story and I want to do it with joy, and he is like, oh my gosh, you have to write that book.
Wow.
You have to write that book. You have to write it. And the book agent, I met her and she walked in the room and she said, you get me this book in July and I will have it sold in September. Wow. I mean, it was like, And I was like, are you serious? She was like, absolutely. She's like,
So,
are you ready to write it? I was like, I've been telling my children the story. I can get it down on paper. Yes.
so what was the timeline for you to write it?
I wrote I had been, researching the book for, a couple years just for myself. But when I put pen to paper, it was about 6 months.
Okay.
And it was pretty fortuitous. We went to go shop the book in September of 2019, and the 1619 project had just dropped. And so, you want to talk about God's timing. I don't know how well received a book about enslaved history would have gone over. A children's book about slave history would have gone over in like 2018. Or even in like March of 2019, if anybody would have taken the meeting. But suddenly I had just finished this book and we were shopping it when these conversations were on everybody's mind. And so when I walked in there with a book that's like, this is an introduction to children about their enslaved history, the publishers were like, oh my gosh. They were literally just listening to the 1619 project.
Wow. That's amazing. When God gives you a vision, he will always give you provision.
You got that right. Amen. Amen.
And that is truly a good story for any person who has doubts about something, because here it is. You had the vision. Mm-hmm. You started doubting the vision. Someone else started to talk you out of the vision until the right person spoke. And then all of a sudden the doors open up.
Yeah. And there was like a year between those conversations.
Yeah. But still, it's now is as good a time is probably but the best time for it to drop, because our society has gone through a lot since 2020. Here we are in 2021, and we're still smoldering. We touched on it. It's not important to talk about, but then you have a whole set of people who are looking at this CRT thing and not thinking. So what better time than to talk about legacy and give it in a very simplistic, palatable way to some young people?
Yes. Yes, it is. Now is the time.
Do you see yourself writing another one?
I actually am almost done with my second book.
Okay.
Yes. Because my kids keep growing and I keep having things to talk with them about.
So we see a series of books to kind of follow their ages, so that so you're touching on, so pretty soon you should have a YA novel coming out or some.
Listen, anything now, I just say anything's possible. I'm open. Yes, anything is possible for sure.
What motivates you and why?
My girls. I've always been a person who was driven. I've always been goal oriented. I have to see something in my head, even if it seems so far-fetched. I have to see it because I have to know what I'm going towards. So that's how my brain works. And when I think about my daughters navigating the world, I want the world to be better for them. And so everything that I do, every show that I direct, every play that I work on, every piece of media that I touch, I want it to make it better. I want my Black girls to have a better and more authentic experience navigating the world than I did. So I want stories out there that not only grow their consciousness, but grow the consciousness of everyone they're around. I want to change the terrain.
Okay. What advice can you offer to any person who wants to write, who is in a position like you were, who different profession, but you had this desire and burning of your spirit to write a book? What advice could you give them?
Be fearless. And know why you want to write the book. And if you know why you want to write it, then you'll do it. That will remain your motivator. If you want to write a book to make a lot of money, but if you want to write a book because you really do feel like, you have something to say. And what you have to say has great value. And it could be value to a few or value to many. If you feel like your voice is missing in the world and there are people like you who need to be validated, who need to be amplified, whose stories need to be told, tell your story, tell those stories.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking with Shelley Williams, the author of Your Legacy. Great children's book, great adult book to learn some invaluable information about a bold reclaiming of our enslaved history. It's currently available on blackbookstore.com. And Shelley, if you can also share how people can follow you on social media and your websites, that would be great also.
Yes, I'm on Instagram at Shelley Williams and at Your Legacy Book.
Outstanding. We thank you very much for your time and for your in-depth conversation about the book, writing, and I hope that it inspires someone to pick up the book and read it. Also inspire someone to write their story, learn your legacy. It is so important. You have been watching Rolling Out's Meet the Author. I'm your host, Tigner, with our special guest today, Shelley Williams. Shelley, continue being creative and always be inspired to write. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tigner.